If you're looking for a way to make your own sliding door hardware, today I'm going to show you how I make mine. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back. Jason with Ben's Woodworking. This week I want to share how to make your own sliding door hardware. The second project that I ever built was the very popular Anna White sliding door console that I think was originally developed by someone by the name of Nikki Grandy, sliding door console, and then Anna White ended up posting it again. So it was a second project I had. I was just starting to get into woodworking, thought it'd be a really cool idea for a bar, not for a media console, but for a bar. Since then, it's probably the most popular piece that I build. I get asked about it all the time, and I've built it multiple times since then. So in that tutorial, which you can find online, it's totally free, there was a section, it's changed since then, there was a section that talks about making your own sliding door hardware. I can't remember who it was that posted it, but it was associated with Nikki Grandy's sliding door console. So I opened it up, I read it. I still today use a lot of the same things, but I found other items that work, and I want to share those with you guys today. So I'm going to walk you through the process of exactly what you'll need to make your own sliding door hardware. So the reason I still make my own as opposed to buying it, because you can actually get it for fairly cheap now online. The thing that I don't like about it is if you're using it for small furniture pieces like the console, which I'll show you in the picture here, having something small, a much smaller scale for a small piece of furniture tends to look a little bit better in my opinion. The thing that I find about most of the sliding door hardware that you can buy is one, it'll only come with the hardware for one door, and as you saw in the photo, that has two sliding doors. Now you can make a variation where it just has one door, but in the one that I built, it has two sliding doors. Is you always have to buy the additional brackets to hang a second door. And that's where it does start to get expensive and you start adding cost. The other downside is that it can at times be too big of hardware for the project that you're doing. So the technique that I use that I found in that original posting, I think fits the size for the piece that I build or pieces similar to it. So I will continue to do it. And it is for the most part less expensive. So let's go ahead and talk about what I have. Okay, so for the most part, the doors that I'll build for this are just simple shaker style doors. And if you refer back to my video on how I made the shaker style doors, same thing applies with these. The material thickness is 3/4 of an inch, all right? All that my hardware is a piece of 1/8 inch thick, 1 inch wide aluminum bar that you can buy at any home store for relatively inexpensive. I've got a small wheel here. I've got some bolts and some washers and some nuts on the back. And I'm gonna give a much closer showing of exactly what those pieces look like. So here I've got the items laid out, and they're laid out in the order in which they are going to go in. So the first thing I take is my bolt. From there, I'm gonna take my 1/4 inch washer, I'm gonna slide it onto that bolt. From there, it is simply going to go through the piece that I use for my mounting piece to my door and for the wheel itself. The next thing I'm going to add is one of the 1/4 inch nylon lock nuts. Now, the first one I put on, I will put on to where this edge is going into the back of the actual rod itself. And honestly, I only do that for aesthetic reasons, which I'll show you here in just a moment. So once I've got it screwed all the way down so it's nice and tight, again, remember, we're gonna be using a wheel that the amount of tightness does not affect it because it has that bearing. The next thing I put on is my wheel itself. Then I'm gonna take my last 1/4 inch lock nut and I'm gonna place it with the beveled edge facing out. And I tighten that down. The wheel still turns no problem. So if you look at that, that is how I have it. Now, I have this nut here and this nut here. It's basically spacing for the door. Say you use a much thicker door, you can actually place a spacer in there to offset the height. When working with 3/4 inch thick material, this nut here and this nut here gives it enough offset to where the door hangs straight down and it doesn't move around a lot. But again, if you're using a wider door, you may want to add a spacer, and that will compensate for the weight of the door. So that's it. That's how I make my hardware. With these 2 holes here, those are simply there to go through the door itself. And again, for the door, I use the exact same 1.25 inch bolts. They'll go through this, go through the door, and then on the back side of the door, I just use one of my 1/4 inch nuts and I lock it in place. Making your own sliding door hardware is honestly that easy. Okay, everybody, so that's essentially it. Making your own sliding door hardware can be very, very simple. It looks very nice. A couple of tips and pointers that I would like to share with you guys that I've learned along the way. The first thing, if you remember earlier, I was talking about the original plan called for using these steel wheels, right? Now, that is exactly what I was talking about with the paint. Which the paint I'll get to here in a moment. The issue that I found with these is you can only use these effectively. You have to get the tightness of tightening the bolts down because there is no bearing. So the tightness of the nuts themselves dictated how freely these rolled. The other problem is it's very, very wide. So you get a lot of play like this when you're using these wheels. Another thing, they're relatively expensive because you have to buy the pulley and take them out of the pulley. And then also, of course, the paint chips off, and that's a problem. So if you notice, if I put these side by side, this one here is much, much thinner than this one. It also rolls very, very freely and very quiet, does not make any noise. So these, because they're only $5 for 2 of them, if you're making something with 2 doors, that's 10 bucks. Depending on how large of a project you're doing, you can get one of these at about 8 feet long for, I think it's like $20. One piece may be good enough for the project you're doing. You may need a little bit less, it'll be even cheaper. And then, the nuts and the bolts are minuscule in the amount of cost, a few dollars for those items. The way that it actually rolls is essentially, you're gonna have a bar that's gonna be attached to your furniture like this. Then this wheel will roll on whatever it is that you're using left and right. So you're just using the same aluminum iron to hang that door and have it roll on this. So the way that you mount that is you can go out and I like to buy 1-inch spacers. This is not a 1-inch spacer, this is a 1/2 inch, but I buy the 1-inch spacers. You can just get plastic ones. You'll run a bolt through, and again, I'll show you in another example picture at the end. You'll get to see what I'm talking about. You essentially would basically place that washer or that spacer in between the aluminum angle iron and the piece of furniture itself, and that gives you the offset so this sticks out in front. Very, very simple to do. So the next thing that I want to bring up is painting the aluminum. So painting the aluminum can be kind of a pain, and I've learned a few things over the last few builds, the times that I built this, what seems to work the best for me. So I'm going to share that with you. The first thing that I'll do is I'll sand the aluminum. I'll just take my random orbital sander real quick, go over it, just kind of get that scratch pattern going. Is it necessary? I'm not sure, but it seems to work pretty well for me. The next thing I do is I'll use this self-etching primer, and I'll do 1 or 2 good coats of this self-etching primer. I'll let it fully cure, and then I'm going to use my paint. The paint that I have found tends to work really well is this Krylon Dual Super Bond spray paint. And I just use a black satin in most cases. That seems to work pretty well as long as you let the paint cure the amount of time it's supposed to cure. What I end up doing with my wheels is a little bit different. So whatever color I end up painting my aluminum is the same color I'm going to paint my wheels. But what I do for my wheels is I actually use some Plasti Dip. Now, the reason I use Plasti Dip is because, again, if you look at this wheel and you see the amount of paint that is chipped off and the fact that it's metal on metal, you don't really have that problem with these nylon wheels. However, I still was concerned about this wheel turning on that metal and that metal wearing away the paint on the nylon. So what the idea that I had is if I use Plasti Dip and I spray all around on the inside before I actually paint the wheel, it'll basically build a barrier on the nylon and then it's rolling on the paint. So I've had this one now for about 6 months to a year. It's been a while. So and there is no paint that is chipped. There's no plasti dip that is chipped from that wheel. That has worked really well, and it has also cut down on the noise dramatically that the door will make sliding from one way to the other. So take that tip, use it if you want to. This is very durable stuff, especially in an application like this. All I'll do is I'll take one bolt, long bolt, I'll put all 4 of my wheels on, I'll put a spacer in between them, and I'll spray them all around that groove, and then I'll put it down and I'll spray like 3 coats. It does not take long at all, and it really makes this durable on the inside, and you'll have no paint chipping off on the wheels, and you'll have no paint chipping off on the actual rail that it rides on itself, which is great, especially since it's aluminum and the paint seems to be so brittle. So that's how I make my sliding door hardware. Again, I got the original plans from Nikki Grandy's sliding door console, and there was a tutorial in there. I've just made certain modifications to it to where now it works really, really well, and I will continue to use this method until somebody comes out with some super, super cheap barn door hardware that fits the furniture pieces that I build. So as always, everybody, like, subscribe, share. If you got any comments, leave them below as usual. Thank you so much to everybody that's already subscribed. I'm going to work on trying to make my videos a little bit shorter because I know I get a little bit long-winded in some of my videos. So today, hopefully this was a nice change of pace. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I appreciate the comments that I've been getting so far and the messages, and I guess I will see you next week. Thanks.